Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start our discussion concerned with the general science, technology and the environmental sciences. We have quite a good number of questions this year. Let's start with the first question. The question reads as, which of the following leaf modifications occurs in the desert areas to inhibit water loss? So all the plants normally which grow in desert regions are called as xerophytes. All these plants would modify themselves in such a way, and every effort or every modification will be directed towards the conservation of water. Please remember, the waxy layers, hardness, reduced size of leaves, reduced number of leaves, or altered shape, structure, composition of leaves. All these modifications are intended to conserve water. Many plants would store water in their stem, in their leaves. They will reduce the number of leaves. What would happen because of reduction in the number of leaves is the amount of transpiration reduces. Increase in hardness of the plant surface or leaf surface would also decrease the amount of water loss from the leaves. Waxy layer also prevents the evaporation, normally the transpiration process from the leaves, and then this reduced size of leaves, tiny leaves, would also helps in conservation of water, which prevents excessive loss of water, and then modification of shape of leaves, that is into thorns. All these are the general modifications concerned with xerophytes or plants which grow in desert regions to prevent water loss or to inhibit water loss. So all the options, that is statement number 1, 2 and 3 would be appropriate here. And let's move on to the next question. And second question says, the National Green Tribunal the differences between the National Green Tribunal and the Central Pollution Control Board. Please remember, the National Green Tribunal, there is no doubt, it was enacted by the Parliament of India. It was formed or established by an act. And please remember, any order given by the Government of India is executive order. Please remember, the Central Pollution Control Board is a statutory body. It is not just any organ of the Government of India created by an executive order, but it is a statutory body. So the first statement is not very appropriate here. And then the statement number 2 reads as, National Green Tribunal provides environmental justice and helps reduce the burden of litigation in the higher courts. Absolutely appropriate here. And then the second part of the statement number 2 reads as, Central Pollution Control Board promotes cleanliness, yes, absolutely, of streams and wells, yes, and aims to improve the quality of air in the country, yes. The prevention of water pollution and prevention of air pollution are the primary responsibilities of Central Pollution Control Board, which is a statutory body. So statement number 2 is appropriate when compared with statement number 1. So the statement number 2 is the option, that is 2 only. B would be the appropriate answer. We'll move on to the next question, that is, which of the following has or have shrunk immensely, dried up in the recent past due to human activities? Please remember, this is a factual question or fact based question. So in the recent times, the Aral Sea and Lake Baikal. So please remember, the Aral Sea, the shrinking process or the drying up or aridity process concerned with Aral Sea started as early as 1960 onwards. And then Lake Baikal, in the past 2 decades, we have seen the shrinking or drying up of Lake Baikal, one of the very, very largest lakes, freshwater lakes in the world, deepest freshwater lakes in the world. Lake Baikal also because of human activity. So the options would be Aral Sea and Lake Baikal, that is the 1 and 3, that is option D, that is appropriate. Let's move on to the next question here. And then the question number 4 reads as, the identity platform Aadhaar provides open application programming interface APIs. What does it imply? Please remember, it's an open source. It can be integrated into any electronic device. Absolutely appropriate. It is an open source program. It's interface, application programming interface. It can be integrated into any electronic device. Absolutely appropriate. And online authentication using iris is possible. Yes. You must all have observed that the iris recognition, iris scanning, iris picture capture, all these would be used at the time of registration or issuing of Aadhaar. This is a method of authentication because it cannot be altered once a person registers himself or herself with the iris scanning. So online authentication using iris is very much possible. So both the statements are appropriate, both 1 and 2 are appropriate. Option C is appropriate here. And then moving on to the next question. Question number 5, with reference to the So Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture, please remember. So this Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture is a voluntary organization. Please remember, it is a voluntary organization, normally or primarily supported by Food and Agriculture Organization of United States, FAO. So it is not any outcome of a Paris summit or so any other the intergovernmental organizations. It is a voluntary, international voluntary organization which doesn't impose any binding obligations on any member country. And please remember, India is not a member here. India is not a member here. So statement number 1 is inappropriate because it is not an outcome of climate summit of Paris. Number 3, India was instrumental. No, India is not a member of the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. It is a voluntary organization initiated by the Food and Agriculture Organization. So statement number 2, which says membership of GACSA does not create any binding. Yes, it does not. It is voluntary, completely based on voluntary contributions. So statement number 2 is appropriate. That is option B is appropriate. Yes, moving on to the next question. Question number 6 says the terminal high altitude area defense. So we have this, please remember. The terminal high altitude area defense is anti-missile interceptor system developed by the United States Defense Services. The unique characteristic feature of this anti-missile interceptor system is this anti-missile interceptor doesn't carry any payload in the form of a weapon grade material or any kind of explosive material. This is an interceptor which is intended to disrupt or destroy any incoming threat in the form of a missile or a weapon or a payload during re-entry phase. And then this anti-missile interceptor, in the name of terminal high altitude area defense, bombards the incoming threat in the form of a missile only based on kinetic energy of this interceptor missile, that is anti-missile interceptor developed by the United States Defense Services. So this doesn't carry any explosive material. So what is the advantage of not carrying an explosive material through an anti-missile interceptor system? In the case of a nuclear warhead carried by any missile in the form of incoming threat, this explosive, if this anti-missile interceptor carries an explosive material or any weapon or any payload, this initiates the nuclear fission in the nuclear weapon carried by the incoming enemy missile. So if any incoming threat in the form of a missile which carries nuclear payload, if it is intercepted by this anti-missile system, that is terminal high altitude area defense, which is based only on kinetic energy, this will not initiate chain reaction, this will not cause explosion of the nuclear warhead in the case of enemy threat carrying nuclear warhead. So to avoid any kind of nuclear explosion in the form of incoming enemy missile, this anti-missile interceptor system developed by United States Defense Services terminal high altitude area defense is unique. So it is not an Israeli radar, it is not India's indigenous anti-missile program, it is not a defense collaboration between Japan and South Korea, it is American anti-missile interceptor system which is based on kinetic energy of the interceptor, not based on any payload which is explosive payload. So option C is appropriate. Let's move on to the next question. The question number 7, which reads as, in which of the following areas technology be used? What kind of technology we are talking about here? So the mobile phone operations. So this technology normally is the positioning technology. Normally we are talking about in general the positioning technology. So mobile phone operations, yes, we all use the positioning technology for navigation and to understand relative positioning and to generate emergency beacon, radio beacon to enable search and rescue operations and to aid in navigation, movement, transportation in unknown territories. And then yes, for multiple applications, this positioning service or technology associated with positioning service will be used in mobile phone operations, banking operations. Yes, the banking operations widely use this technology and control in the power gates. Remotely located power grids or distantly located power grids can be effectively controlled using this positioning technology here. So all the three statements seem to be appropriate. Option D is appropriate here. Let's move on to the Next question, that is question number 8. The WannaCry, Patreon, Eternal Blue. Please remember, all these things were very popular. All these were referred as the ransomwares. Please remember, these were very popular. These were widely in news for the past 2 to 3 years. And then England got very greatly affected because this WannaCry affected the National Health Service of England, so which resulted in closing down of hundreds of hospitals based on National Health Service, and around 20,000 ambulance services were cancelled, and many patients couldn't avail medical facilities here. And then this ransomware is a kind of a cyber attack on the software program of government organizations or private organizations in return of the demanded money. So they would capture or they would gain command over the data of government or private organizations, and they would put forth their demands in the form of some ransom, that is some amount of money. So provided if you pay the money, they would release all the data, otherwise they would destroy the data. So kind of this kind of cyber attack, which is called as a ransomware, is the WannaCry, Petya, Eternal Blue. So these are cyber attacks. So option C is appropriate here. Moving on to the next question. With reference to the circumstances in Indian agriculture, the concept of conservation agriculture. So please remember conservation agriculture here. So assume significance. Which of the following fall under the conservation agriculture? So let me put all these things in appropriate place here. Number 1, avoiding monoculture practices. What would we achieve by avoiding monoculture practices? We would have genetic diversity of plants. We can have plants with modified features or new adaptations suitable to the environment. We can have multiple number of genetic variations, and these would be very useful because they would be having adaptations to the changing environmental conditions, and then genetic variations also. So by avoiding monoculture, we can definitely have improvised agricultural practices. The second statement says adopting minimum tillage by not disturbing the soil, especially the top layer of the soil, which is 20 centimeter. The top 20 centimeter layer of the soil is called as the most important layer of the soil, which is useful for agricultural practices, because that layer is responsible for storage of organic substances, storage of the salts, minerals, which are useful for the growth and development of plants, and the soil nutrients, soil moisture, the gases useful to the growth and development of plants. All these essential nutrients are present in the top 20 layers of the soil. So when you do not disrupt the top nutrient rich top layer of the soil by tillage process or tilling process, we can conserve large amount of nitrogen or the natural organic fertilizers, the nutrients, and then the moisture content, and then the soil gases or useful gases. They will not be disturbed because of this minimizing tillage. If you perform tillage, then all these things will be lost, and then that might also result in soil erosion, a lot of other detrimental impacts. So minimum disturbance of the nutrient rich top layer of the soil, that is by adopting minimum tillage practice. That is also very useful for conservation agriculture practice. And then third statement says avoiding the cultivation of plantation crops, of course, because plantation crops are surplus in the case of nutrients, that is fertilizers, pesticides, and the moisture or water. So avoiding the cultivation of plantation crops is a secondary aspect concerned with the conservation of agriculture here. So the statement number 4 says that using crop residues to cover soil surface, yes, to prevent the loss of moisture, loss of organic substances, that is nutrients, and to conserve soil microbial life. All these essential substances are useful when they are present in the nutrient rich top layer of the soil. To protect all these useful things to the agricultural practices, we need to cover the surface of the soil with crop residues, and the advice is a permanent coverage of the soil surface with crop residues. Very useful practice under conservation agriculture. And adopting, the fifth statement says adopting spatial and temporal crop sequencing, that is crop rotations. And crop rotation is very important component of conservation agriculture here. So we have this. So most of the options seem to be very appropriate here, and then please remember the first option is very appropriate here, second option is very appropriate, the third statement is not very directly appropriate, but yes, of course, to a certain extent, yes. And then fourth statement is very appropriate, and statement number 5 is also very appropriate here. So essentially, we can, if we need to eliminate anything, we can eliminate only the statement number 3 here. But unfortunately, we don't have that option here. So for all these conditions, definitely, so we can go for the 2, 3, 4, 5 option, or 1, 2, 3, 5 option. So otherwise, it is very difficult to choose. So it is one tricky question, and then we need to correlate with a lot of facts here, because after referring to many agricultural websites, international agricultural practices and conservation practices concerned with agriculture, so all the 5 statements, I found all the 5 statements to be appropriate to greater extent. So that is why I've got this doubt, and then we can just have a clarification with the UPSC's official key. So till then, I leave that to the aspirants to check the appropriateness of all the 5 statements here, and we are moving to the next question. Question number 10. The term 6th mass extinction or 6th extinction is often mentioned in the news in the context of the discussion of. Please remember, the threat, it is kind of threat which is concerned with the anthropological interferences, the resource utilization, and then of course misuse, overuse, abuse of resources, habitat fragmentation, destruction of habitat, and then resulting in the damage to the ecosystems, of course causing pollution to the components of the atmosphere or environment, and then obviously resulting in something called as the climate change. All these things are directly related to this new threat. So this new threat concerns the 6th mass extinction or 6th extinction, which is, of course, this term was in practice because of Holocene extinction phenomena which occurred in the past. So let's go through all the statements here. So the answer options, the answer option A says widespread monoculture practice in agriculture and large scale commercial farming with indiscriminate use of chemicals in many parts of the world that may result in the loss of good native ecosystems. To a certain extent, we can accept this, but the monoculture practice, commercial farming practices with the use of chemicals in many parts of the world are occurring not at the cost of native ecosystems, but with improvised modern practices. So they would not destroy, they would not lead to something called as an extinction level event. So if at all they might cause after a very long time. So we cannot deem this as an appropriate option here. We're moving to the answer option B, fears of a possible collision of a meteorite with the earth in the near future in the manner it happened 65 million years ago that caused the mass extinction of many species including those of dinosaurs. This is just an assumption here. We do not have a scientific basis of arrival of meteorite as a surprise, and we do not have a scientific basis for this, and no scientist has ever warned about this surprise meteorite collision with the earth. Let's keep this answer option B aside, and then answer option C says large scale cultivation of genetically modified crops. This itself says that we do not have yet a large scale cultivation of genetically modified crops. We have to a certain extent, yes, GM crops we are using, but not large scale globally in many parts of the world, and promoting their cultivation in other parts of the world, which may cause the disappearance of good native crop plants and the loss of food biodiversity. To a certain extent, not to a greater extent, only to very negligible extent, this is appropriate, and this cannot cause something called as an extinction level event. This cannot cause. So coming to the answer statement, that is answer option D, mankind's overexploitation, absolutely appropriate. Overexploitation, we are ruining the resources without thinking that there is something called as tomorrow. And then misuse of natural resources, it is not only misuse, it is abuse, it is overuse along with misuse of natural resources. And then fragmentation, that is loss of natural habitat to the organisms, flora and fauna, destruction of ecosystems, yes, we are destroying in the form of deforestation, and then pollution and global climate change, yes, all these are definitely going to result in an extinction level event in the near future. So answer option D is the most relevant and most appropriate answer option here for the question number 10. We are moving on to the next question here. Yes, question number 11, which says with reference to the Indian regional, please remember the term regional. So regional navigation satellite system, consider the following statements here. IRNSS. So yes, absolutely correct. IRNSS statement number 1 says IRNSS has 3 satellites in geostationary and 4 satellites in geosynchronous orbits. Absolutely appropriate. We have in total 7 satellites in orbiting around the earth, providing the regional navigation services for Indian territory. Statement number 2 says the Indian regional navigation satellite system covers entire India, of course, and about 5,500 square kilometers beyond its borders, it is inappropriate. As the fact says, it is only 1,500 square kilometers. That is, so we have when you refer to the website Indian Space Research Organization, and when you click on IRNSS, you would find this, that the IRNSS covers India, and then 1500, that is 1,500 kilometers beyond its borders. That is the limit of Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. So statement number 2 is inappropriate. Coming to statement number 3, India will have its own satellite navigation system with full global coverage by the middle of 2019. Please remember, number 1 is, this is a regional navigation satellite system. Number 2, because in 2018 we are not yet, we haven't yet completed the total number of satellites of 9. We are only having 7 as of now. We need 2 more satellites in place to complete this, and the deadline is not yet fixed as 2019 by Indian Space Research Organization, and it is not yet fixed. So we cannot say that by the middle of 2019 we can have a full coverage by the IRNSS. Moreover, there is something to think about, because IRNSS is a regional navigation satellite system, and statement number 3 says full global coverage. So these are mutually contradictory. So statement number 2 is the most statement number 1 is the most appropriate here. That is answer option A is most appropriate here. Total 7 satellites. So A is appropriate here. We are moving on to the next question, that is question number 12. Consider the following phenomena. Light is affected by gravity. Okay, so yes, of course, to a certain extent, yes, because we have the black hole phenomena, the quantum realm. Yes, light would be affected by gravity, but to a certain extent, yes, we can argue on this or debate upon this, but still, yes, light would be affected by gravity here. And the universe is constantly expanding. Well, we need to have a lot of proof for this to stay to comment about this statement. And then matter warps around, it's a surrounding space-time. Yes, of course, all these are very much related to Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. Please remember, the Albert Einstein's theory of relativity speaks only about the impact of gravity on light and the space-time realm. So the 1 and 3 are very appropriate, and Albert Einstein's theory of relativity never spoke or comment about anything related to the constant expansion of the universe. So statements number 1 and 3 are appropriate. That is, answer option C is appropriate here. And then yes, we are moving to the next one. Question number 13. Consider the following pairs here, terms sometimes in context and topics in news. So Belay 2, artificial experiment intelligence. Please remember, Belay 2 is concerned with particle or atomic physics. Belay 2 is an experiment performed concerned with particle physics or atomic physics here, elementary particles. It is not concerned with artificial experiment or intelligence experiment here. Statement number 2 says blockchain. Yes, blockchain is concerned with the cryptography. That is, if you want to store something in a coded form, in a secret form, if you want to store something, an important piece of data with something code, some code or something like that, that cryptography is concerned with blockchain. So we will divide the entire data into different blocks, and then we'll store that data in a digital form. And then of course, one popular example is your Bitcoin here, so which is a encrypted form of secret data here. An example is your cryptocurrency, Bitcoin stuff. Yes, blockchain is concerned with the cryptography or cryptocurrency. And statement number 3 says CRISPR-Cas9. Please remember, CRISPR-Cas9 is concerned with the pattern of DNA sequencing in bacteria and archaea. Please remember, those are the most primary or primitive organisms which formed on the earth 3.6 billion years ago. So CRISPR-Cas9 is the DNA sequencing pattern of bacteria and archaea. It is nowhere related to particle physics. So statement number 1 and statement number 3 are inappropriate, except the statement number 2, that is blockchain, which is very much related to cryptography and cryptocurrency. So only 2, statement number 2 is appropriate here. So answer option B is appropriate here. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 14. Which of the following statement best describes carbon fertilization? Please remember, you'll have to understand the terms here. Carbon on one hand and fertilization on another hand. So we have carbon, which is primarily used in the form of carbon dioxide by the plants for the purpose of photosynthesis. Because we are talking about fertilization here, we are talking about any useful substance which can help the growth and development of plants here. So understanding the keywords, carbon fertilization, let's move on to the answer options here. Answer option A says increased plant growth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This seems to be very convincing, because the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere helps for the photosynthetic process of plants. So, more the carbon dioxide, more can be the photosynthetic process performed by the plants here. Let's keep the statement A aside. Coming to the statement B or option B, increased temperature of earth due to increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Please remember, increased temperature of earth will be very useful for the growth and development of plants only in the initial stages. As you can see, the growth and development of plants will be is more in the tropical parts of the world because of warmth, relative warmth we have. But this is a short term phenomena. Please remember, the global warming caused by the carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas resulting in greenhouse effect will result in rise in the temperature. This raised temperature will be useful for the growth and development of plants only for a short term period, but on a long term basis it is detrimental to the growth and development of plants. So, we will have to consider this in a critical manner here. Statement number B or answer option B seems to be relatively less appropriate here. Moving on to the option C, increased acidity of oceans as a result of increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. To a certain extent, when carbon dioxide interacts with water, it forms carbonic acid, and then to a certain extent, yes, but we are talking about carbon fertilization here in the question, and then increased acidity of oceans as a result of increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not very much directly related or relevant to the carbon fertilization phenomena. So, please remember, it is not very much linked or related to the concept of the carbon fertilization here. Moving on to the option D, adaptation of all living beings on the earth to the climate change brought about by the increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Please read this, again you will have to be specific. Adaptation of all living beings on the earth to the climate change brought about by the increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Please remember, we are talking about carbon fertilization here, and all living beings will not be affected or will not be related to the concept of carbon fertilization. Please remember, among all these four answer options, the answer option A seems to be very appropriate because increased concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere primarily stimulates the growth and development of plants because it stimulates the photosynthetic process. So, answer option A is appropriate in this case, and we are moving to the next question. Question number 15 says, the alarm of your smartphone rings in the morning, you wake up and tap it to stop the alarm, which causes your geyser to be switched on automatically. So, the smart mirror in your bathroom shows the day's weather and also indicates the level of water in your overhead tank after you take some groceries from your refrigerator for making breakfast. It recognizes the shortage of stock in it and places an order for the supply of fresh grocery items. When you step out of your house and lock the door, and lights, fans, geysers and AC machines get switched off automatically. A pretty lengthy question, man. On your way to office, your car warns you about traffic congestion ahead and suggests an alternative route, and if you are late for a meeting, it sends a message to your office accordingly. Please remember, this is something called as seamless interconnectivity concerned with the broadband internet. So, this is very much, this was very much in news in the past 2 years, and this was named as Internet of Things, and there is no doubt about this. Whenever you read all the seamless connectivity of all the smart or all the devices which can have artificial intelligence through broadband internet is very much connected to Internet of Things, that is IoT, Internet of Things. Please remember, it is not concerned with border gateway protocol, it is not concerned with plain internet protocol, or it is not a virtual private network. It is directly concerned with Internet of Things here. So, it is the future emerging technology concerned with the information communication facilities, and then this enables the incorporation of artificial intelligence in developing smart devices and connecting seamless connectivity, wireless connectivity of all these devices for the destined purpose. That is the core concept or essence of Internet of Things. So, option B is appropriate here. We are moving on to the next question, that is question number 16. Which one of the following is an artificial lake? It is a surprise question because we never thought that UPSC would ask factual or fact based questions, and the Kodaikanal is one of the most beautiful man-made, that is artificial lakes in India. So, it is very direct. So, Kolleru, Nainital and Renuka, they are natural, and then Kodaikanal is man-made artificial lake, that is answer option A is appropriate here. So, it is a very simple and direct question here, that is question number 16. We are moving on to the next question, that is question number 17. Which of the following is or are the possible consequences of heavy sand mining in riverbeds. So we'll have to think seriously about this, because the sand mining is very commonly seen in the past 2 to 3 years, because of increased construction activities and real estate and shortage of the river, shortage of the sand, and then you must have heard about a lot of new terminologies concerned with the robo sand or something like that. Yes, let's slip on to the statements here. Statement number 1 says decrease salinity in the river. No. Sand mining will not influence the salinity concentration in the river directly. Statement number 2, pollution of groundwater to certain extent. Yes, because there would be seepage of large number of substances when the river bed, the sand which is present in the river bed is removed. Definitely there would be the erosion of the river banks and river bed, and there will be seepage and leakage or leaching of toxic substances, or the silt will be resulting in pollution of the groundwater. Yes, absolutely appropriate. And then so the third statement says lowering of the water table. Yes, definitely yes, lowering of the water table because of removal of this protective layer in the form of sand mining in the river beds. Definitely the groundwater table will be definitely lowered. So 2 and 3 are appropriate. Statement number answer option B is appropriate here. We are moving to the next question, that is question number 18 with reference to agricultural soils. So consider the following statements here. High content of organic matter in the soil drastically reduces its water holding capacity. The water holding capacity of the soil in general will not be directly influenced by the organic matter. Please remember this. The high content of organic matter in soil drastically reduces its water holding capacity is inappropriate. Moving on to statement number 2, soil does not play any role in the sulfur cycle. Please remember, soil does play, because sulfur is a sedimentary nutrient. Normally we study about the sedimentary nutrient cycle or biogeochemical cycles in the first chapter of environment. Then we speak about the sulfur, phosphorus and all these cycles. So soil plays a very crucial role because sulfur is a sedimentary nutrient. Soil does play here, so this statement is inappropriate here. Irrigation over a period of time, the statement number 3 says irrigation over a period of time can contribute to the salinization of some agricultural lands. Okay, so we have irrigation over a period of time can contribute to salinization of some agricultural lands is a very relevant statement here, because of the so-called first green revolution we witnessed in India between 1962 and 1969 time periods. Thanks to M.S. Swaminathan. So the first green revolution, during first green revolution we witnessed the use of chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides in large quantities to increase the agricultural crop yields, and now that increased chemical fertilizer and pesticide usage has resulted in and over irrigation because of water intense cropping. So because of all these processes, so the salinization or salinity concentration of agricultural lands has increased in India. Over 60% of the soils in India become increasingly saline. So we have the salt concentrations have increased because of over irrigation and over usage of chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And statement number 3 is appropriate here, that is answer option B is appropriate. We are moving on to the next question, question number 19. The Partnership for Action on Green Economy. Please remember the thought of a green economy originated as early as 1992 Earth Summit, the first Earth Summit. But the question says Partnership for Action. Please remember, after 1992 Earth Summit, there was no action taken concerned with establishing green economies. So as a UN mechanism to assist countries transition towards greener and more inclusive economies emerged at. Please remember, the thought process of Partnership for Action on Green Economy, the concept of green economy originated during 1992 Earth Summit, but there was no action taken, or there was no great or significant amount of transition towards greener and more inclusive economies. So after 20 years, that is Rio plus 20, again witnessed a kind of remembrance concerned with the green economy here, because the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development 2012, that is Rio de Janeiro, Rio plus 20 summit. So during that summit, we witnessed this PAG, that is Partnership for Action. So because till then no action was taken, and then a resolution was passed to take action concerned with the green economy or transition of economies towards greener and more inclusive form of economies here. So it's a fact based question. So the answer is a B, that is United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development 2012, that is Rio plus 20, Rio de Janeiro. So that's the answer here. We're moving on to the next question, question number 20. 3-dimensional 3D printing. Please remember, we can create anything and everything using 3D printing. We can print anything even in the space, that is International Space Station ISS manifested. It showed the world that they can print their own spare parts or the requirements or equipments, even confectionaries, or they can print their own clothes, they can print their own tissues using a 3D printer which is appropriately placed with suitable raw materials even in space. So 3D printing is evolutionary future technology which can enable the recreation of anything, virtually anything, right from the chocolates or biscuits, that is confectionery items, to the spare parts or the any kind of machinery concerned with any kind of equipment, that is automobile spare parts, any tissue of the life forms, for example human beings in medical electronics, medical diagnostics, therapeutics, surgeries, all the components of human body, right from tissues, that is bionic ears or the functioning eyes or the skin, joints, all can be manufactured using 3D printing, and then reconstructive surgeries are very greatly assisted. The surgeries are very much assisted by 3D printing. So we can have data processing technologies greatly will be dealt with the help of 3D printing. So there is no stopping of 3D printing here. All the statements are appropriate here. Statement option D is appropriate here concerned with the question number 20, that is 3D printing. All the options are appropriate here. We are moving on to the next question. Why is a plant called Prosopis juliflora, so often mentioned in news? Please remember, Prosopis juliflora is a native of Western Africa here. So this is a very fast growing plant. Normally this plant, when it is cultivated here, it is normally when plants are cultivated in places which is not a native habitat for any plant, that kind of plant is called as exotic plant. For example, this Prosopis juliflora is native to Western Africa. So if it is brought to India and cultivated in India, so this becomes exotic plant. Normally these kind of exotic species of plants have got like a detrimental impact on the native species here. These kind of plants can have a negative impact because these can alter the way pests spread from one plant to another plant, the way pollination process occurs in a habitat or in ecosystem, the way pollination occurs, pests act, the pests behave, or the way plant diseases spread. So we might introduce new diseases through exotic plants which can destroy the native species, and then this Prosopis juliflora will have deep seated roots in the soil which would result in consumption and storage of huge amount of water. So Prosopis juliflora consumes large amount of water, stores large amount of water because of deep seated roots, and this results in deprivation of water to other plants. So this Prosopis juliflora is very detrimental to the other plants which are native plants to the ecosystem. So let's come back to the answer options here. Its extract is widely used in cosmetics. No, it is not yet established whether we can use this plant for cosmetics or not. So as of now it is inappropriate. Option B, it tends to reduce biodiversity in the area in which it grows. Yes, absolutely correct, because it influences pollination process. This Prosopis juliflora influences the pollination process. It alters the plant diseases or microorganisms distribution in any geographical region, and this alters the behavior of pests, and this plant consumes or stores huge amount of water from the ground, so from the soil. So this definitely disrupts the biodiversity in the area in which it grows. And option C says its extract is used in the synthesis of pesticides. It is not yet established by a thorough scientific research. So, and the fourth option is none of the above. So option B is very appropriate here concerned with the question number 21. So we are moving on to the next question, question number 22. In which of the following states is Pakhui Wildlife Sanctuary? Pakhui is not just a wildlife sanctuary, it is a tiger reserve as well. It is present in Arunachal Pradesh. Please remember, these kind of questions are very rare, or they're becoming seldom visible in UPSC preliminary question papers. These are fact-based questions. We used to have these kind of questions 2 to 3 years ago or 5 years ago, but surprisingly these fact-based questions are reappearing now. So it's a very simple and direct question, fact-based question. The location of Pakhui Wildlife Sanctuary, which is also Pakhui Tiger Reserve, which is located in Arunachal Pradesh. We are moving on to the next question, question number 23. With reference to India's satellite launch vehicles, consider the following statements. So, number 1, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Please remember, Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle is a 4-stage satellite launch vehicle. First stage is always a solid, second is liquid, third is solid, fourth is liquid. PSLV is in general used for launching remote sensing satellites in the low Earth polar sun synchronous orbit, PSSO, polar sun synchronous orbit. And now we have used PSLVs in extended versions, that is XL versions, to launch remote sensing satellite to the moon and the Mars orbiter as well. So PSLV in general is a tried, tested. We have this, the launch vehicle concerned with the remote sensing satellites into the low Earth orbit, especially into the polar sun synchronous orbit. And then the statement says PSLVs launch the satellites useful for the Earth resources monitoring, that is remote sensing satellites, whereas the geosynchronous satellite launch vehicle GSLVs are designed mainly to launch communication satellites. Absolutely correct. GSLVs are long distance satellite launch vehicles. They can travel to a distance of 35,786 kilometers away from the surface of the Earth, which is your geosynchronous or geostationary orbits around the Earth. So that is the destined orbit for communication satellite or INSAT series of satellites. So GSLV is in general used to launch communication satellites. So statement number 1 seems to be very appropriate. Moving on to the statement number 2, satellites launched by PSLV appear to remain permanently fixed. This is inappropriate. Please remember, so we are talking about permanently fixed satellites in the same position in the sky is a very inappropriate statement concerned with any satellite here. Especially we are talking about the satellites launched by PSLV. Please remember, no satellite remains permanently fixed. If at all, if it is fixed, it appears as stationary for an observer present on the Earth. And those kind of satellites are those which are called as geostationary satellites, which are present in geostationary orbits, which are communication satellites launched by GSLV. So these kind of satellites, which are geostationary satellites, are not concerned with PSLV. So that another part of the statement is as viewed from a particular location on the Earth. Yes, of course. So statement number 2 is inappropriate. We are talking in statement number 2, the permanently fixed same position will be related to geostationary satellites, which would be launched by GSLV, which is in the orbit 35,786 kilometers from the Earth, which is called as geostationary orbit, which these satellites are communication satellites, which are INSAT series of satellites launched by GSLV and not PSLV. So statement number 2 is inappropriate. Moving on to statement number 3, GSLV Mark III is a 4-staged, inappropriate. GSLV Mark III is a 3-staged vehicle, launch vehicle. The first stage is a solid stage vehicle, second stage is the liquid stage, and third stage is cryogenic upper stage, CUS, it is called as cryogenic upper stage. GSLV Mark III is very huge, with huge amount of payload carrying capacity of 3 to 4 tons. It is the first series of GSLV satellites in which we successfully used cryogenic upper stage here. So GSLV essentially is a 3-stage launch vehicle. Please remember, the statement reads as GSLV Mark III is a 4-stage launch vehicle, with the first and third stages using solid rocket motors and the second and fourth stages using liquid rocket engines. No, this statement is inappropriate. The first stage is solid, second is liquid, third is cryogenic, in total of 3 stages. So GSLV is a 3-stage vehicle. So statement number 1 seems to be appropriate, 2 is inappropriate, 3 is inappropriate. Statement number 1, that means A, answer option A is appropriate here. We are moving on to the next question, question number 24. Consider the following statements here. The definition of critical wildlife habitat is incorporated in the Forest Rights Act 2006. Absolutely correct. We have this. For the first time in India, Baigas are the indigenous tribal populations who predominantly live in central parts of India. Please remember, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, we have this. Baigas are the indigenous people, tribal populations who live in central part of India. And then in 2015, in the year 2015, the government of India for the first time have been given habitat rights. Yes, statement number 2 is appropriate. Statement number 3, Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change officially decides and declares habitat rights for primitive and vulnerable tribal groups in any part of India. This is inappropriate here, because please remember, the Ministry of Tribal Welfare will have this, and then the Act, Forest Right Act, these are the sources of the declaration of habitat rights for primitive and vulnerable tribal groups in India. So please remember, the statement number 1 and statement number 2 are very appropriate, barring the statement number 3. So the 1 and 2 are appropriate. Statement number A, answer option A is appropriate here. We are moving on to the next question, question number 25. So consider the following. We have 1, birds, next dust blowing, third is rain, fourth is wind blowing. Okay, so which of the above spread plant diseases? Well, so as far as plant diseases are concerned, the causative agent in general is called as a pathogen, can be carried by birds, through birds, through dust, through rain, through wind. So please remember, the microorganisms can be airborne, can be waterborne, can be carried by vectors. The vector is a disease transmitting agent or pathogen transmitting agent. The agent can be an insect, a bird, an animal including human being, or just the pathogen can be carried from one plant to another plant through wind, through dust, through water. So all these agents, birds, dust, rain, wind, all these agents can carry the disease causing agent from one plant to another plant, causing the spread of plant diseases. So all the statements are appropriate. 1, 2, 3, 4 all are appropriate. So option D is appropriate. So we are moving on to the next question, question number 26. With reference to organic farming in India, consider the following statements. Yes. Number 1, the National Program for Organic Production (NPOP) is operated under the guidelines and directions of the Union Ministry of Rural Development. Please remember, National Program for Organic Production is normally under the guidelines of Ministry of Commerce. Please remember that it is operated under the guidelines of Ministry of Commerce and not under the directions of Union Ministry of Rural Development. And next statement, statement number 2 says the Agricultural and Processed Food Products Export Development Authority functions as the secretariat for the implementation of National Program for Organic Production is absolutely appropriate here. It is the secretariat. APEDA is the secretariat for the NPOP program. And then the statement number 3 says Sikkim has become India's first fully organic state. Yes, 75,000 hectares of the cropping soil or the agricultural land has been fully converted into the fully converted for the purpose of organic farming, and this is more than 80 to 90% of the land area which is useful for the agricultural practices, and the Sikkim is that state which has achieved this feat completely, a state which performs organic agricultural practice, that is Sikkim, and the first state in India. So statement number 2 and statement number 3 are appropriate, barring statement number 1. So 2 and 3 only, that is answer option B is appropriate here. And then yes, this will be the end of it, I guess. Yes, and if you have any questions, please approach the faculty without any doubt here. And thank you for your time and patience. Thank you.